So here we are, sharing secrets of the soil with me, your host, Regen Ray. Hello, soil lovers, and welcome to another episode of Secrets of the Soil. I'm your host, Regen Ray, and today we're going to start digging deeper into the wonderful world of soil with our guest, Darren from Microstart Farming. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Ray, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. I wanted to just...
everyone in the soil, everywhere in the soil world.
That's it. We're all digging deeper and we're all really interested in knowing everything we can about soil. And so I want to know a little bit more about, who you are and how you got started with, Microstart Farming.
Yeah, well, many years ago, wouldn't it be 34 years ago, I had started farming myself. I bought a property. And I had some advice from agronomists that didn't sit with me too well. So using a lot of chemicals and a lot of artificial fertilizers. So I got caught up with some scientists and did some research, and then I see that it worked. Like, I could see the change in the soil, the change in the pastures, in the health, especially the health of stock. So I then got tangled up with Mary Cole probably 25 years ago and did courses with her, and we worked together doing testing and doing everything that I've done. I've done practical tests on my properties. So I'm always one to make sure it works for myself before I tell anyone else. And it's been a learning thing over many, many years. And then what happened with Microstart was that people next door, people I knew, wanted to get away from chemicals. I could see their soils were starting to fail them. So we started doing a little bit here and there on the side sort of thing. And then it's just grown from there. So now we're helping people out all over the country. So it's been a good experience.
Yeah, I love that. And I think Dr. Mary Cole has been on the podcast, and we're big fans of all the work. And, it's good to see what happens in a lab, but then, it needs the people on the field as well, putting
tests and
trials together, and seeing is believing, and pushing the boundaries of all the research as well, because I feel like in this space, it's a little bit stuck of how it's always been. And a lot of the funding is caught up with the chemical companies and the big ag companies. So what comes out or what's been funded is a little bit, left side, like, the seesaw's not very balanced. So I love the fact that you got on the field and you made mention of the fact that you only recommended what you saw in the early days. Like, what caused you to be curious to experiment down this kind of path?
Basically, probably the main thing was stock health. We bought a property and we were having all sorts of trouble with stock health. So, I didn't know huge amounts about it, but back then I was only in my 20s. I was probably 24 at the time. So I did a bit of research and worked my way back through. So I found some research on some books on what causes problems, mineral deficiencies and these sort of things. So what causes certain problems, and then it all went back to the soil. So everything worked its way back. So then when we started to remineralise the soil to start with, and then we get the soil organisms going, stock health was just different altogether. Farming was so much easier, it was more profitable. And then it really got me interested. Like, I was sort of hooked on the soil biology, the science of it all and all that. So then I just started doing research, and it was originally all for myself, but then things just grew. So,
Awesome. I think that's a great way of, like, just taking knowledge, putting it into practice, and then turn it into experience, and then having others come and say, oh, how did you do that? And what are you doing here? And then being able to do that. In the early days, was it more about just educating yourself? Like, when did Microstart actually kind of become a business, or was it originally just like messing around in the shed and then a hobby business?
Basically it was in my shed. Like, I got a couple of farms myself, so I was making my own fertiliser basically for my farms in the sheds, and then gradually get, starting to do neighbours and friends and then someone else's friend, and, it just sort of grew like that. So, and then a lot of people just want, there's people that just want to get away from chemicals. So this is the main the thing that happened, and a lot of customers we had originally. This was Microstart probably started about 15 years ago, really started to take off. And all their customers, most of our customers were older people, like the farmers that were in their 70s and 80s, because they could see what their farm used to do, and what the health of their stock were like and compared to is now. And when we got the system going, they said, well, this is what my farm used to do. You know, it used to be healthy. It used to have very little weeds, and it was surprising. We originally thought it'd be the younger people, but there is a lot of younger people now. Yeah. Originally, it was the older generation that really took it on. So yeah,
that's a really good point and distinction to make. You know, is that the older farmers at the time had that kind of before and after, where now people don't really know what they didn't know, and the history's kind of been lost, and you know, it becomes like the new normal, I guess, of what is always done. Throw it on. You know, they're kind of, you know, more on kind of thinking that it's just going to be better and okay. And so for the soil lovers who are listening and they've heard Microstart Farming as the company name, explain a little bit about exactly what this kind of thing that we're talking about is. It's obviously a microbiostimulus. Is that how you would refer to it as?
Well, basically what we do is we breed the fungi and the bacteria that the soil need to get a balance. So soil needs to be in a balance. There's different balances for different crops, like annuals and perennials. So to be growing a perennial crop, you probably need 1-to-1 fungal bacteria, where annuals want more bacteria. So if you go too far to the bacterial side, which most farms are, because the fungi gets wiped out through chemicals and chemical fertilisers, become very bacterial dominated, and that's when you get lots of weeds, lots of shallow rooted weeds. You'll then end up with compaction as well. Then you get some of the deep rooting weeds will start to grow. And when you get the balance right, we found that the weeds disappear quite quickly. Like it's amazing how the balance of the soil, when it changes, what grows there really changes quite quickly. So we do add natural fertilisers with it, mainly to keep our bacteria and fungi happy when they go into the soil until the photosynthesis starts to work and the whole system is circulating. So a lot of farms are in a very, we see the worst of it most of the time, where there's a lot of soils that have really been depleted and there's not much going on. So, if they're the ones, it's within 12 months, you normally get them back working, and then within 2 years, so normally 2 to 3 years, they're really back doing their thing. So, and then from then you start building your soil fertility, you start building topsoil. So the soil works its way down through the soil profile, and you get humus starting to be produced, and then the system is just all, self-sufficient basically. So, yeah.
Amazing. Humus is, the gold equivalent to soil.
It is. Yeah.
Very, very powerful. So I love it. And so you mentioned about the fungi being killed off by the fertilizers, and I think, do you think that there's still a lot of people who are applying inputs thinking that they're doing the right thing, or do you think people kind of now know this isn't the right thing to be doing? I need to be looking at different approaches.
Well, from what I can see, a lot of people don't know. Like, they only know what they know. So there's still people putting a lot of fertilisers on that aren't getting the benefits from those fertilisers, because the more you wipe out your fungi and your biology in the soil, the less you get out of your fertilisers. So this is why we've got so much locked up fertiliser, locked up phosphorus. The mycorrhizal fungi gets wiped out. That's what delivers your phosphorus into the plant. No mycorrhizal fungi, phosphorus sits there. So it's a matter of educating people there is another way, and it takes time. You can't change in an instant, especially with cropping. With pastures, you can change reasonably quickly, but with cropping, we generally say half to start with. So half synthetic fertiliser, half we add our biological applications. And then the next year we go back halve it again, back to quarter. And we found that's been really successful. And then also some multi-species cropping, so putting some medics and clovers with it to cover the ground and bring more nitrogen and just get the system working. Yeah. So.
I think you make a really good point there in regards to having a transition plan. I think sometimes I see in this space, that someone wakes up one morning and they say, I'm going to go regenerative, which means I have to no till, no chemicals, no imports. And, they read the list and it's not that easy. And the land actually becomes shocked. And we've seen that across the world recently where farmers have been told to stop nitrate fertilizers to meet global goals, and they're just not yielding anything. And so I really like the fact that you spoke to that point. Can you speak a little bit more about the importance of transitioning and having that kind of roadmap and that plan to meet the goals down in the future?
Yeah, well, I guess the soil's basically addicted to these fertilisers. Like you've wiped out most of the bacteria and fungal through the tests that we do have been wiped out. So there's not very little going on. The soil becomes compacted, so the soil particles actually fall to pieces. They become smaller and they compact. So the ground is then hard to dig into, get no oxygen in it. So basically, you've got to get the system started. So we say to add, use half the fertiliser you normally use to get the plants growing, the crops growing, and then as soon as they're up, we add our biological application, and they're about 2 inches high, and that way some of it gets absorbed through the plant and goes down through the roots and actually makes the plant healthy, starts to photosynthesize a lot more, and the sugars then go down through the roots. Those sugars then feed the smallest bacteria, which is in the gram of soil, as thousands. And those bacteria, they're 3 parts carbon and 5 parts nitrogen. So what happened, the next bacteria, the protozoa bacteria, they come along and they start consuming them, and they do not use all the nitrogen. So then you start making nitrogen, plant-available nitrogen to the soil. So it's about, and that takes, it takes a little bit of time. If it's a very humid conditions, it'll do it within a couple of months. But if it's cold and dry, it'll take longer. But it'll still work, but it just takes a little bit longer. Some of the work we've done in northern New South Wales and Queensland, it's worked really, really quickly. We've built 10 mils of good topsoil, which is not a lot, a half inch, in 3 months.
Wow.
But just because, and that was over the last few summers where it was so wet in the summer and so warm that really worked really well. So, and humidity is the key to this. Yeah, and keeping the ground covered, lots of ground cover also creates humidity. So that's a very, very important thing to have.
Yeah, I love that. Just the ability to zoom out and see the many parts and see that humidity plays a big part, and also just busting these myths that it takes thousands of years to build, 1 inch of topsoil. I see these kind of quoted, and I think this is such old school thinking in a way. And, farmers in New Zealand and in Western Australia and everywhere around the world really are growing topsoil. Like what you said, it's like, half an inch in 3 months. That's just crazy growth and solve such a big problem with water infiltration and drought resilience and fire resilience. It's just, a win-win-win for all parts of the ecosystem.
Yeah, and when we did that, even that 10 mil that we grew in 3 months, when we went up there after about 4 months, you could feel the soil that held moisture.
Yeah.
And was friable, was real. And then you went to the other, we'd done 1,000 acres, 1,000 acres next door, it felt dry. And the difference was, chalk and cheese. And the worms are already coming back. And the worms normally come back quite quickly. They normally, within 6, or in the season, you normally have good worm numbers. And that's very important because that opens the soil up. So some of the farms we did a test on farms in the local area, which is Western Victoria and Southeast South Australia. And we were getting, 30 to 50 worms per shovelful of soil.
Wow.
So it's over 3 tonne of worms to the hectare.
Wowzers.
And they'll go down. We got a backhoe and we dug down deep, 6 feet. And it was just like honeycomb. The worms had been down that deep. So this just opens the soil up. The roots will work their way down, everything. Instead of farming with 4 inches, you can farm with 2 feet. So, and use all that moisture that ground holds. So,
Yeah, and they're doing the work 24/7 for free,
That's right. Yeah. And worm castings have got about 10 times more phosphorus in them than the surrounding soil. So, they're producing your phosphorus as well. So, everything can be produced in a healthy system. We just got to keep that balance. And we say, we generally say it'll take 2 to 3 years to get soil in balance, and then pick out the areas that aren't so good. This is in a pasture situation, and work on that rather than have to fertilise every year, which is a big cost. So get the soil going and then pick out the worst places. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And so with your product, how is it applied? Is it at the seed point? Are you like inoculating seed, or are you doing sprays? And how's the application process?
Well, we basically say it's a foliar. It works in all the tests that I've done over many, many years. The best way is to when you've got at least 2 inches of grass, growing plants, because they will absorb it as well. You can put it on, bare ground, but we find the best way is to into growing plants, just because of the absorption. You can see the plant change within about 4 or 5 hours.
Wow.
It takes up the nutrients and turns a different colour. So, we found too that once we get the system going, the frosts just do not affect the pastures, and we can see it from paddock to paddock now how much difference it is. So, and then you get the bricks reading up, which a lot of people would know the sugar readings in the plant. Now you get them above 4%, you start getting disease and pest resistance. So, and that, using some of those pesticides is they're very dangerous chemicals, I guess. So yeah, so we try and we're also working with different fungi and different bacteria to control different pests and diseases in the interim while you're getting your soil healthy. So once your soil's healthy, you generally don't have many problems.
Yeah, and I think that's really important too, because I've seen photos on some of the Facebook groups where people have spoken about how they're applying, natural inputs, and then a frost hits and the neighbors are all white and their farm is still green.
Yes.
And I just think about all that dew that is collected and going into the soil for free. It doesn't even have to have a downpour in order for moisture to go into the soil, and it's also not frozen. Which, because I think when I was reading the comments, the sugar contents of the grass, when it goes up, its freeze point changes. So
yeah, exactly, it does. Yes.
I look at that and go, oh my God, why isn't everyone doing this?
Yeah, and you'll find it in the warmer months, just a fog, it'll keep it going, and whereas others it won't. The difference between good soil, which you would have probably seen this on some of the soil learning centre stuff that they've done, the difference between good soil and bad soil holding moisture is about 20 litres per square metre in the first 300 mil. So it's a huge amount, and we've got these droughts going on. We have had droughts going on. If we can hold moisture, it's going to change. It's going to make not only help keep the grass growing in the paddocks, but the moisture in the atmosphere that comes out of that will also help to make the climate different. So it's all relevant, It's about getting, getting that soil to hold moisture, and
come back to life and be.
Come back to life. Yeah,
that's right. And the microorganisms doing what they do best. And now with your product, what's I guess farmers are used to buying chemicals or inputs. How is your product like price comparing to that? Like a farmer's going to be saving a lot of money. Does the product go further because it gets mixed in with water? How does that kind of application and cost process go?
Yeah, no, it's very, very, very comparable. It actually probably works out cheaper because you cut your chemical applications, especially in the cropping situation.
Yep.
We have had work done with another company that's done some, one of the universities in New South Wales have actually been able, this is something we don't recommend so much, but in the interim, when you're changing, to use some chemicals with our product. And we've got additives, natural additives we put with it. Use about a quarter of the chemical they normally would use and still get good results. But you're not wiping out all the bacteria and fungi at the same time. So it's something that we can do. It's something we don't add the chemical in our factory. We make the brew and then you add the amount. It just as you put it out. You cannot leave it sitting and because you'll wipe out some of the bacteria and fungi. So it's something that you can use in the interim, and then as the soil gets better, well, then you get less and less, and that's how we want to work it. Just change.
Yeah. And how long does the product last for? Because I guess one of the things I see all the time is, if it's natural and it's fungi and bacteria and sitting in a tub, like how long does that last for? Does it need to be reactivated when you go use it? I hear of things like adding water and aerating it and feeding molasses. Do you need to reactivate the product, or as soon as you get it, you just apply it?
Well, the best way is to get it out as soon as possible, but we have had times where it's sat for 3 months, 4 months, and the farmers have used it. We generally just say to circulate it, even aerate it or whatever, just a little bit. But with the ones that have been sitting there for 3 or 4 months, there's one particular case where it sat there for about 4 months, and because of the contractor couldn't get on the job because it got wet, it was hot, which is not ideal. The more heat, the less the less shelf life it's got. But they used it, and it still worked really, really well. So we've got products in there to try and help preserve it and keep the bacteria. They'll go dormant. We don't want them to die. So we've done a lot of work with this to try and, because we know it's a big issue when you're sending stuff from down South Australia to, say, Cairns. It's a long way and it's hot up there. So, but we're finding that we've had really good results with that, and there hasn't been a problem with it actually dying. It still works. So, but fresh is best still if you can do it that way.
Of course. And I still think, something is better than nothing, especially if it's natural. Nature knows how to activate it and how to bring things back and how to unlock minerals. And, the more I learn about this world of soil, the more it gets fascinating to go, God, it's just got it all sorted, doesn't it?
It does. There's a lot to learn. And even scientists still say there's such a lot still to learn, But the thing is with, the biological side of it, it's been around for 10,000 years or longer, And you look at some of the soils over in India where they're 20 foot deep of topsoil. They're absolutely beautiful. Mary showed me some pictures of them. She's been over there, Mary Cole, and the soil's just magnificent. And it's from a biological approach. They didn't know exactly what they're doing because they didn't have microscopes. But our scientists have picked it up and, well, this is what's been going on. We need to replicate it and, get that biology back in the soil. So get it working for us.
Yeah, it always amazes me that we know more about, deep space and the deep oceans and not what's right underneath our feet.
Yeah, exactly. There's thousands and thousands of species of bacteria that don't know what they do. Yeah. So, we know the basics, I guess, and scientists are still working on it, but it's a long way to go.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Soil lovers, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I'm going to explore a little bit more about the early signs of seeing that your farm's collapsing and what to look for. And also, I hear that your product also helps with the behavior of animals. So we're going to cover that just after the break. Stick with us. Hello, soil lovers. I hope you're enjoying today's guest and this podcast. But I wanted to just let you know that when you get excited about soil, just as you're hearing about our guests, then you will want to check out the Soil Learning Centre. The Soil Learning Centre is a hub that we put together and digitalized all the content over the years that were originally on DVD into this online learning experience. So if any of our guests or any of the topics that we speak about during the podcast whet your appetite and you want to get your hands dirtier and dig deeper and get educated around different things around soil, whether it be biodynamics, permaculture, whether it be using a microscope, or whether it just be hanging out with other like-minded educators, mentors, and facilitators, then the Soil Learning Centre is a place for you to hang out and dig deeper. That's the soillearningcentre.com. We have lots of different programs, courses, and even a membership. So if you want to belong to a community of other soil lovers, then that's the place to hang out. Well, until we meet again, enjoy the rest of this podcast. Back to the program. Welcome back, soil lovers. You're hanging out with Regen Ray and Darren from Microstart. I just wanted to dig a little bit deeper into the fact that you've been working with farmers for years and you've been seeing the behavioural change. I want to touch two topics here: the change in the behaviour of the farmer, the person, and then also the livestock and what happens there, because I think that's really fascinating that you've been able to observe the behavioural changes above the ground by feeding the biology under the ground.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Like farmers have found that it's a lot easier. Like they're not going out to kill something.
Yeah.
They're going out they get interested in what's going on in the soil, not just above it. So they're going out to see what's growing rather than what they need to kill, which is the way it's been. It's been a long time, but that's been the problem. So a lot of the farmers say that their stock health is just so much easier. Their stock behaviour is a lot better because the stock have got more of a balanced diet. They become quieter. The rotational grazing it's a very major point of biological farming, which everyone should do. Even in the old system, we should always rotate our grazing. But we've had farmers that have actually videoed their cattle, and where they put them in a paddock, they usually leave them there for 2 weeks or 10 days. But what's been happening since they fixed their soil, since they've got the balance right, the cattle have been basically telling them when to move. So he shows us when the cattle goes out there 7 or 8 days, they're all grazing, sitting down. On the 9th day, they're at the gate. And they won't open the gate, they're in the next paddock. And they'll do the same thing for 7 or 8, it might be 6 days, depending on the weather. As soon as that loses what happens is the pasture loses its sweetness. You'll see when you put stock in a paddock, sometimes it'll go a little bit off colour, a bit of yellow. So that means the sugar levels have gone in out of the leaf into the roots. So that's not as sweet. So the goodness is gone. So the cattle realise this, the next paddock's so sweet, so they're ready to go. And we've seen this happen with sheep, cattle, and a number of things. And it's amazing the stock, how they know where the goodness is. And we've had dairies where we've done trials on certain paddocks, and the dairy farmer said every time they let their cattle out of the dairy, they go to that gate. And they've done that. He said they've done that for 12 months. And it's just because of the goodness in the plant. And once you get a lot of goodness in it, they're not eating as much, which means you're getting more out of your farm. So it's it's been very interesting to watch the behaviour of the stock, and then the health of the stock is just the worm burden is just heaps different. The gut problems, the scarring and all that just seems to go. It's it gets everything healthy. Like the gut of the rumen of a cow needs healthy grass, lots of these sugars to breed the bacteria that they digest, and they don't just digest the grass; they breed bacteria in their rumen. So the more sugar the more natural sugars, not sugar, the natural sugars that we can produce, the better they're going to be. So yeah,
I love that, the fact that the farmer gets to work less, so they're working smarter, not harder. The animals are telling them when to move, and then less vet bills from the sound of it, because the resilience of the animals just increases naturally.
It does, definitely. And we've seen it. I've seen it in myself, and the results that I got off my farm really made me want to learn more and help people. So, because I had a farm that was the stock were very cooked. Like we were drenching every 6 weeks and whatever. And then we got to the stage where we had stock on there, sheep on there, we didn't drench all their lives because they just did not get sick. But we still don't. We still use drenches. We're not saying we're not dead against them, but we just didn't need to. We did vet tests and all that, and they just were healthy. So it just makes life so much easier.
Yeah, I think that's such a great, holistic way of raising animals and just having an ecosystem that's just working all together. I guess a lot of the times you've mentioned about microscopes and bricks meters and so forth, and sometimes in this space there's a lot of tools and gadgets that people might need to buy, or whether it's doing soil tests. But the other big movement is kind of like visual soil assessments, or like just reading the landscape. Yeah. What are some of the early stages that people can see on their farm that there is such like biodiversity collapse kind of happening, or, people see the early day stages to say, I need to start doing something different, not just keep putting this, chemicals on that's going to kill all the fungi and make it.
Yeah. I guess one of the easiest ones is weeds. If you've got a lot of weeds, things are going, you're out of balance. Another way is a lot of soils have got really hard through the nitrogen fertilisers or the potash type fertilisers it really sets the soil. So just get a piece of wire and poke it in the soil and see how far you get in without putting too much pressure on it. You should get down with a foot with no problem. But a lot of soils you won't get 2 inches, so and just dig the soil and see what life's in there. If there's any worms and smell it. If it smells, when it's wet, if it smells bad, it is bad. You've got anaerobic bacteria. You've got a bad system. So, which means no oxygen's getting in there. It's going off. If there's water laying on top of the soil after 10 mils of rain, it's not going into the soil, which you see a lot with cropping. With the fallows that they leave. The water just sits on top. Where's that go? Straight back up in the atmosphere. So we want that in the ground so you can use it. It's just the amount of life that's on your farm. When you get the balance right, it's not just the life that's in the ground, it's the life that's above the ground. The whole system starts. Frogs, birds, whatever. The whole thing comes back to life. In a pasture situation, say with cattle, there's probably 4 times more weight of life underground than what you've got above ground.
Crazy.
It's just huge, the amount of difference. So, you've got to look after that life. You've got to farm that soil too. So to get the bacteria and the fungi and everything else that's in amongst it back to life. And, things will go well.
Yeah, as you were explaining that, you reminded me of a story that someone once shared with me about how there was like a conservation park and it was locked up land and protected and got millions of dollars of funding to keep it safe, and they built a fence around it. And then there's a regenerative farmer down the road, and then the wildlife started coming back, the frogs, the birds, the bees, the species they hadn't seen in that area for decades, and grasses that no one even put the seeds there. Just the environment became the right environment that seed had needed, and it germinated. And and it just kind of blows my mind sometimes that we have these locked up conservational parks, and yet the regenerative farmer down the road is bringing back and goals that project's meant to be doing.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of these locked up places, you got to get the balance right, so then to get the system going. You can't lock it up and think the balance, it may come back in 100 years. And nature takes a long time to regenerate itself. So to get that bacteria and the fungi in a balance that works, you'll find the system starts and then it just gets bigger and bigger. And it's no different to on a farm or in a national park. You just want to get that balance right. And we've seen some of the work they've done overseas in the desert areas where they've got the system back working again. So. Yeah, and it just makes a huge difference. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no environment that can't kind of come back to what its natural state should be like if if we just let it and nurture it to be more natural. Now, some of our soil lovers, they may not have access to land or they're not farmers. Is your product just as good for the home gardener and soil in someone's backyard? Like, is it viable for the home person?
Yeah, we do. We have a garden range as well. Yeah, so it's a different mix because we're growing different plants. So it's with vegetables and that, they like a lot more bacteria and stuff. So which is a little bit different. It's not a great difference, but it's just enough to stimulate the right bacteria in the soil. So, and it's the same thing. Just put it on growing plants. Little and often is the best way of doing it. So it just keeps that system going.
Yeah, I love the fact that soil biologically soil functions kind of somewhat the same globally. The climate might be different, what you're doing is different. That's the change, but really the biology, like humans, our blood biology is the same globally. Might be different, but and that's what I love about this kind of world is that we can apply the science globally, and there are people innovating all around the world, and seeing is believing. And I love anyone who's getting out there and putting it in their own backyard or playing around with biodynamics, or whether it be other cover cropping, even doing cover cropping in your own backyard is interesting. Keeping the ground covered and armored.
It's interesting you say that, because even in the garden you grow lots of plants. Lots of plants. In the biological system, you have more plants growing per square metre. They just want to, all the plants want to grow. Whereas in the conventional system, there's not enough to keep all those plants going. So there's only one here, you get bare patches and all that sort of thing. So, but then in the biological system, in your garden, grow lots and lots of plants. Then you create a habitat. And then you get all the little insects and little, lizards and all that sort of thing. And they're good because they keep pests away. You get the beneficials. You don't get the pests. Yeah. So lots of plants, great habitat. And we find it on farms as well that once you get that density really going, the amount of things like skinks and things like that, they're just crawling with it, all over the place. So it's just, the system creates goodness. So it creates the good pests, the good species, and gets rid of the pests. So yeah, and it goes right through from weeds right through to pests and diseases. So, yeah.
And as for the outcome of the product, do people report that the food tastes better or different or colours? What's the?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, it's definitely got that lot better taste. This is what we're talking about before about bricks reading in pastures. Well, and it works the same with vegetables. Like if your bricks reading's up around 10%, you're going to have a really sweet tasting vegetable, which is going to be very, very good for you. A lot of the veggies you buy, 3 or 4% might be max. So, which means there's very little goodness. For every 1% that it goes up, it doubles the nutritional value of that vegetable. So if you've got things that's from 4 to 10%, it's huge amounts of nutritional difference. So and just it's sweet, you'll taste the sweetness. It's home gardeners generally can taste their own goodness, can't they?
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. They're more attached to the whole, process and the intention of why they grew that food. And I just want to mention to the soil lovers who are listening, when we refer to the thing bricks, it's basically a way of measuring the sugar contents, and you use a particular device that's known as a refractometer, and it refracts light. And based on that, it gives you like this little blue line and white line reading in the viewfinder, and it gives you the percentage of sugar contents. And I some people go, but if you make the grass too sweet, wouldn't bugs want that more? And I say, pour a bag of sugar in your Coke and see if you still want to drink it. There's a point where the sugar contents is too sweet that even humans can't eat something that's too sweet. Ever had a dessert and go, oh, I can't eat that, it's too rich, it's too sweet. Animals are the same. And so bringing that sweetness up, it's not good for their palate, even though we're talking about sweetness. So I thought
it is a sweetener, but it's also an indication of goodness, of nutritional value in the plant. It is different to your normal sugar, your processed sugar. It's quite a bit different. It's something that the body of the animal or our body can handle a lot easier because it's not refined. But so the goodness, it's an indicator of goodness and nutritional value. And I think in now the latest tests, we should have about 200 elements in our food. I reckon we're down to about 15.
Yeah.
So this is where we're going to get this, this bricks reading means that the sun's working better for us. We're getting more into the plant and we're getting more of these minerals in trace elements. So it's just health all over. Like, it doesn't matter if it's a plant, it all goes right through to us. So it starts from the soil, ends up in us. So, and you see it all the time where people are just lacking that goodness. So we need to change our system so that we get that goodness back in our foods.
Yeah, I always love that explanation of like, you are what you ate. Yes. So it's like it kind of messes with some people's brains, but it's like the grass is eating the biology in the soil, and then an animal or us are eating the grass or the produce, and and it's a waterfall. Then we eat it, and it's in our gut biome, and then that changes our chemical balances and so forth. And very interesting, that whole soil to gut connection. And now the research between gut health and mental health, and maybe the biology that's in our bodies is causing people to, behave differently because of the chemical changes. So
people have got to think, with the bacteria that's in the soil, we have a lot of bacteria in and on our bodies. The average person's about 2.5 kilograms of bacteria. So it's a huge amount. So you want to be looking after those bacteria because they look after you. They're about 70% of your immune system. So you got to think of it in a different way. They're looking after us, so we can feed them properly. So I guess, it makes you think a bit different.
Yeah, I agree. And I think in the future, we might be buying food not by the kilos and its weight, because that could just be empty nutrients. So maybe we're buying dollar per nutrient density rather than kilos. So, eating an apple, because nowadays you need to eat 4 apples to keep the doctor away, not 1. So
that's right. Yeah, and I think that's a very good point with the farming systems that are about, that we're growing lots and lots of food, but very little goodness. There was a study done in the United States back in 1950 and it went to 1989 about the nutrient density of their staple foods over there, and that dropped between 50 and 80% in that time. So it's Crazy. A huge amount. So you've got to eat 2 or 3 times as much to get the same amount of goodness. So, and this is, they talk about feeding the world. Well, we just got to get goodness back in. So you don't have to grow as much.
Yeah.
You don't have to eat as much, and we'll still grow the same amount, but it's just a lot more goodness in it. We find that with the biological system, we're not losing yield; we're actually gaining yield. So we're not growing less, but we're growing more and a lot more nutrition. So yeah.
And I think on the other side is that once it's more nutrient dense, we probably eat less as well. So we don't need,
sure.
We don't feel hungry as often. With the cravings aren't there, and so there's a reduction in the consumption. A way of feeding the world is increasing nutrient density. So.
Yes, and they've done studies with cattle where they watch how they have cameras on them and see how much more they're laying down during the day, because they're full. They're not trying to eat more and more. They're not just standing up eating all the time, and just because of that nutrient density in the grass. So, yeah.
So fascinating, Darren. If anyone's out there thinking, God, I've got to get my hands on some of this product, where can they go and get it from?
Or you can go to your website.
Well, the link will be around the video somewhere. Absolutely, there is a link around the video where you can go. And I love your information and your sequence of emails. It's very informative, and I love the journey that you take people through. One that I've been going through over the last few months, and you've got a PDF download. What's that all about?
Yeah, it was just about how to start, how to what's been happening in your soil, how to change, what to look for, so that you can see. A lot of people don't realise what's in their soil. And so we just want to tell them what to look for and see the differences. Always when you start, take pictures. Dig a hole, take some photos. Take the photos of the grass, how thick the plants are, just so that because it's not an instant process. It's not going to happen overnight. So in 3 months' time, you go back and have a look at it, there'll be differences. But if you're going out in that paddock every day, you're not going to notice it because you're seeing gradual change. But if you take some pictures, you'll see the difference. And then you'll see the worms come back, the different invertebrates and all sorts come back into place. So it's just a matter of really looking at your soil and feeling it, smell it, do all sorts. Yeah. So.
I love that that tip to just kind of slow down and observe it, but take those before photos, because I think a lot of people forget and they're like, what was that paddock like? Or I don't remember the grass density and all that. But if you're taking photos and you're documenting, even if you never go back to them, at least you can if you need to. So I think that's
even the colour of the grass will change. It'll get darker because the nitrogen we're bringing in. When you get the system going, you can bring in over 400 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare over 3 months over the spring, which is a huge amount. It's miles more than the plant will ever use. So the colours are real deep green. So if you've got photos, you can see, well, this is what it was and this is how it is. So yeah, it's very important to do that.
A final question that's buzzing on in my brain, and I don't know if soil lovers are thinking the same. If you've got a spray equipment, do you run your product through the normal equipment, or do you have to buy new stuff or change the spray heads? Is there any moving parts, or is it a bit of plug and play?
Yeah, we do. People do run it through their normal spray systems. We just say to give it a good wash out, a little bit of chemical residue, when it's not going to affect it too much. The bacteria will break down chemicals in the soil over time. Any chemical residues, and it'll get broken down. It's the same in a spray tank. We've got to keep the pressure down. So if normal spray nozzles are quite fine, it will work, but you'll just have to keep the pressure down around 25 psi before you start to harm the living organisms, I guess. So there's a few different ways that people use what they got. So some people use a fire pot and put a burnless jet on that, and with a pressure gauge. Quite simple, and that's quite easy, especially if you've got a lot of trees or slopey ground. So that works very well. But yes, people are doing a lot. Change nozzles, just as you said, as fertiliser nozzles, so they can go faster over the ground and cover more. So, but all different sorts of spray equipment. To helicopters, we have people doing the helicopters, and that's worked fine. Yes, so just in rough country, country that you can't get to, and some of the country that rough country, we say if you can get to the top of it, it's amazing how you watch it grow. It'll come down the hill, So, if you can get across the top with a spray rig or some sort, over time it'll work its way down the hill. So, and you'll see that happening. It's very interesting.
Very exciting stuff. Thank you so much for sharing everything today, Darren. It has been an absolute blast. But before we go, you need to become the voice of our soil. Are you ready?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, you've just now become the soil. You've embodied its powers and it has a voice. What would you say to all of us on planet Earth as the soil?
Look after me, feed me well, don't kill me with chemicals. Keep me covered because I get cold and I also get hot.
Yeah,
I need cover. Be nice to me. Look after me. Look at me and be nice to me.
I love that. Give it some, it has emotion, feelings, and I even love the fact that before you mentioned that the fungi have like a pressure resistance. They need to be cared for. You can't, treat them like dirt.
Right. Yeah, so they're living organisms, and they're very fragile, so they need to be looked after. Yeah. So
yeah, I love that.
But when they can work, and they'll work for you, and things will be easy. So.
Yeah. This is the number one thing I see when people are reporting is, I guess sometimes in this world we are attached to our to-do list. The amount of hours we need to spend on a tractor or things. Yeah. Do to prep for the next season. And then all of a sudden you outsource it to the biology and you think, oh, why am I needed here? Just time with your family. That's why.
That's right. That's basically what you're doing. You're getting something else to do the work. Yeah.
Outsourcing to the microbes and there's no salaries and no work cover.
That's it. Yes.
All right, Darren, it's been so great hanging out with you and sharing everything. And for the soil lovers, there is a link around this video to opt in to receive their amazing email sequence and also that PDF that we spoke about. It's super impressive. I remember the first time I downloaded it, I was like, wow, there's so much information in here. And I think I even reached out and said, do you want to turn this into a course? Because it was just like full of information. And I know you and your team are very busy and, we might cross that one day in the future, but you're out there in the paddocks, in the fields, making the results happen and farmers are seeing with their own eyes. So keep up the great work.
Yeah, and if farmers want to talk to us, they can contact me and we can talk. It's I'm very willing to talk about it. And we do trips all over the country. Just every year we go for a trip and go and see farmers and try and help out and we do what we can. So and we enjoy the people and enjoy helping them.
It's a great community. I love it too, and I've probably experienced the same. So it is a bit addictive. You just want to spend as much time as you can out in these regenerative farms, and it's a very different spirit and different way of seeing the landscape, and it's very heart and soul fulfilling. From my point of view anyway. So
it is. Yeah, it definitely is. Yes.
Awesome. Well, soil lovers, all the links and for you to hang out with Darren and get access to some of the products and their PDF links are around the video. Darren, thanks a lot for coming along.
Oh, thank you very much. And thank you, soil lovers.
Excellent. Well, soil lovers, until next time, get outside, get your hands dirty and keep digging deeper into the wonderful world of soils. Wait, before you hit the skip button, if you're a soil lover and love listening to my podcast, then I want you to discover more by getting access to my Patreon, where I share behind the scenes and bonus content that doesn't always make the conversations on the podcast. So head over to secretsofthesoil.com/support, where for a very small fee, you get to hang out with me and other soil lovers, where we get to geek out about soil and get access to exclusive content.
It's very exclusive. No, not really. It's just a lot of fun and a way that we get to support this podcast together in order so that we can have deeper conversations all about soil from mentors all around the world. So what are you waiting for? Go on, show your support and token appreciation for this podcast. Until next time. Well, soil lovers, that's enough secrets for one episode. I really hope that you enjoyed all the secrets shared during this conversation. But hey, let's not keep it a secret. Please share this podcast around and make sure that you like it and leave us a review, because that really helps spread the secrets of the soil. Until next time, remember, get outside, get your hands dirty, and keep digging deeper into your soils.